Welcome back to our conversation as we are in week 3 of a series entitled Choose to Live, because we want this year to be the best year of our life. And if that's going to happen, we have to be intentional about many things. And today we want to talk about how we can choose to live in relationship with God, because that ultimately is who we were made by, and that's ultimately who we were made for. We were made by God, for God, to be in relationship with Him. And we see that most clearly in John chapter 15, right? When Jesus, as he's talking about the vine and the branches, talks about that we need to abide in Him, right? To live in Him. And I want to give you an image that might help that come more concrete for us. I want you to imagine just a big chair. And I want you to imagine, just for the sake of this conversation today, that that chair is God. Then the question for us is, where are we supposed to live, right? We're supposed to live in the chair. Now, if we're supposed to live in the chair, that means we have to believe that. And I just want to encourage you today that you and I were made by God, for God. That's who made us. And whether we feel Him or not, that just let that go. Just know today you were made by God, for Him. You were made to live in the chair. We were made to live in relationship with God, right? And there are some things that help us stay in relationship with God, and there are some things that pull us out of our relationship with God. Now, if you just stick with the series, stick with the conversation, we're going to get to some really in-depth conversation around freedom and prayer and hope as we get into this series. But today, just know that there are some things that help us stay in the chair and pull us out of the chair. Do you know what those things are in your life? Do you know, first of all, the things that pull you out of the chair? Are you aware of your temptations in life? In fact, are you aware of your greatest temptation? And are you in touch with when you are most significantly tempted? If we're going to take the spiritual life seriously, then we have to be serious about the spiritual life, right? We have to live with intentionality. And if we're going to live in the chair, that means first I have to learn how to say no if I'm going to learn how to live yes. Do you know temptations? Do you know what they sound like? And do you know when you're tempted? In fact, I want to give you 4 words today that might help you be honest about when you're most tempted or most vulnerable to leaving the chair, right? And we talk about a lot about this in AA, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, H-A-L-T. When we're hungry for something, when we're angry, when we're lonely, or when we're tired, we're vulnerable to being pulled out the chair. We got to know what's cooking on the inside if we're going to be attentive to the way that God is calling us to stay in communion. But we also have to be attentive to what's happening on the inside if we're going to be able to say no. Do you know what pulls you out the chair? You might also be benefit today from learning who pulls you out the chair, right? Some of us have relationships with people that are not healthy, and those relationships pull us out the chair. On the flip side, you got to know what helps you stay in the chair. That's why we talked about Christian friendship yesterday. And that's why even the day before that, we talked about making time for friendship, right? We need the right people in our life who are going to support us and help focus us on the chair, on living in the Lord. One of the things that we need if we're going to stay in the chair is people around us who are going to help us there. Secondly, we need time for the Lord. I know that there's a lot of things competing for time. I even talked about that when we talked about authentic friendship. But we need time for God. And sometimes when we lift up all the things that we need time for, it reveals just how unhealthy our lives have become when we can't find time for the very things that we need the most. The 2 most influential things, I think, for us living in the chair are we need people and we need time. And the most detrimental things, I think, is just not being attentive to temptation. So what's one thing that you can do today? Well, I want to ask you just a couple questions. Number one, are you in the chair now? Even as you listen to this podcast, do you have a sense of where your life is heading? Is the pace, momentum, the trajectory of your day, are you with the Lord? And if you're not, then just ask Him for help. If you are, then just make sure that you stay there, right? And there, what you can think about today is 2 questions. Number one, what's the one thing that pulls you out of the chair the most? And what's the one person that helps you stay in the chair the most? Think about those 2 things today. What pulls you out and who helps you stay there? Keep looking deep inside. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how the Mass can help us and God's design to continue to stay in relationship with Him, how we can choose to live there. And until we have that conversation about the Mass, let's be attentive to God with us. Let's live in the chair. And until we have that conversation, God bless you.